Canadians are pretty smart. We invent many things that go on to be globally significant. Drugs or pharmaceuticals is an area of research that we do very well in developing cures and treatments for a wide range of health issues. While we do a good job conceiving of treatments and doing the research, we don't do a good job at all of bringing those products to market. By the time the research is finished, ownership of the intellectual property frequently leaves Canada and moves to its new home in Europe or the United States. Canada makes up just 0.5% of the global population, yet we produce over 5% of the world's research and drug development. We figured that part out. What we have trouble with is commercializing our discoveries once the human proof of concept stage has been reached. Canada is the only advanced pharma market in the world that does not have a billion-dollar company to anchor the industry. At one time we had QLT in Vancouver, which is an example of our intellectual property being acquired by a larger global player that takes the company offshore. The result is a loss to ongoing research and to the Canadian economy. How then do we change that? Enter the Centre for Drug Research and Development, a joint effort between Simon Fraser University, UBC, and the BC Cancer Agency that the federal government recognized as an invaluable initiative and provided funding to expand the reach of the Cdrd across the country. We invited Gordon Mccauley of the Cdrd to join us for a conversation that matters about nurturing, fostering, retaining, and commercializing world-class talent and research in Canada.
Conversations That Matter is a partner program for the Centre for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You're working in an area that I think is fascinating and remains kind of hidden from general view. There's tremendous brain power and research going on, and particularly in the sciences and biomedical sciences, and yet we don't hear about it. How good are we at producing some of the research that can lead to drugs that can make a difference in people's lives?
We are exceptional at producing the research. When you look at the data from around the world, we are 0.5% of the world's population and 5% of the innovative output. We punch way above our weight in basically any metric you want to choose for the quality and the quantity of research that we do. It doesn't matter if it's citations, intellectual property, whatever. We do that exceedingly well. Our challenge is translating that research into economic output. And the best symbol of that, in my view, in Canada, in the biotechnology space, is that Canada is the only advanced pharma market in the world without an anchor company, a billion-dollar company to anchor the industry.
We don't have one.
We don't anymore. We used to have a bunch. I mean, obviously, QLT in Vancouver was a great one. There were others, Biochem Pharma in Montreal and others. They've all been acquired or gone the way of all good things and haven't been replaced by ones to come up behind them. So that's our job at the Centre for Drug Research and Development, is to be that bridge between the extraordinary research we do and the companies that are going to take the products that result from that to the marketplace. So
I find it interesting that you say that we're not very good at getting it to market. You know, a number of years ago I read an interesting article by an economist out of MIT who said, you know, the most valuable resource that you have and the impetus for growing GDP is the brain power of the people in a particular jurisdiction.
Absolutely.
And so we've got the brain power.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean that just by extension, okay, well, there's the brain power, therefore it's going to create problems. What is the challenge? Why is it so difficult to do this?
Well, I mean, so first of all, for very good reasons, medical research from discovery through to human trials and completing human trials is difficult and long because you don't want to make a mistake. But that aside, one of the challenges is it's certainly a global industry, and it's an industry that requires a lot of capital. And in the over the course of the last 10 years or so, there hasn't been enough venture capital in Canada to support the industry. We're seeing that change. I think the federal government's taken a couple of initiatives on that front. Their venture capital catalyst initiative, they call it, Vicky. has generated significant new interest, and I think we're seeing some of the major global VCs participating in Canada and putting people here. So I think it's a combination of things, but capital is certainly one of them.
So what role does the need to be approved by the FDA, an American agency? Why is it so important that you get FDA approval even though we're in Canada?
Well, there's two reasons that it's so important. The first is that the US FDA is absolutely the gold standard around the world. It's not just a Canadian thing. I mean, certainly the European Medicines Agency, the EMA, is an important one as well. But if you look around the world at agencies trying to emulate an effective market, the US FDA, or effective regulator rather, the US FDA is the gold standard. And proof of that, the Chinese FDA recently announced that they would harmonize their rules with the US FDA. So I think that's a pretty good example of why the FDA is so important.
So it in essence is the global standard.
Yes. The other reason is, it remains the case, I believe, the data might be a little bit out of date, that the US marketplace in pharmaceutical products is larger than the next 7 markets combined. So you combine a really good regulator with a really big market, it's the place that you have to go, or the standard against which you have to measure yourself.
Got to get you to hang on here for a second.
Not going anywhere.
While we take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Sorry for the interruption, but I need your help. I'm asking you to support the show by becoming a patron. That means pledging $1 per show. Conversations is a unique program. There's no grandstanding, no arguing, no yelling. Instead, I sit down with people who have unique insights, specialized knowledge, and experiences that inform and enlighten. And we do this on an incredibly limited budget with a very small crew. Well, this is my office, and it's where I edit the show. And then once it's ready, we give it away. You know, so many different websites around the world are carrying this show, but they get it for free. They don't pay us. So I'm asking you to pledge $1 per show by going to patreon.com/conversations that matter. Thanks. We want to keep producing conversations, and with your help, we can. Now let's get back to the show. You get a good idea. You want to go take on a challenge. I know a fellow who just got FDA approval after 20 years on a prostate cancer treatment from Vancouver here. Now it's been bought out by an American company. Before he's really even going to market there, it's already gone to the States. Is that a big challenge for us? Like, we maybe can incubate this, but then how do we keep it here? Because you mentioned exactly QLT right. And others.
That's exactly the challenge. And we, as I said earlier, we're really good at producing that research. And what's happened over the last 15 years or so is that as we've developed products to what's called human proof of concept, usually sort of halfway through the study, where you see your first signal of efficacy in humans. In some cases, when you actually get it to market, there's another Vancouver company called Enermed that got a drug approved and was subsequently thereafter sold. What usually happens is people have tried to get to one of those 2 milestones, and then the product gets sold. There's a bunch of reasons for that, but one of the things that we're really focused on is helping build the ecosystem across Canada so that we can build those companies here and have them stay here. Because when you think about it in public policy terms, governments across the country make a monstrous investment in basic research. And the federal government just added, I think it was $3 billion in the last budget to the process. So it's a huge bet. And you have to be careful, because research is a good in its own right. But certainly it's also reasonable to expect some economic development payoff from that research investment. And again, that's our job, to say, okay, let's find the most compelling things with the most global promise and build them in companies in Canada.
What exactly is your role in helping to take those ideas, bring them to fruition, and help them grow and stay in Canada?
So we do 3 things. The first thing we do is build companies of scale, the companies that have the potential to grow into future anchor companies. Those are companies that generally have they're organized around a thematic idea, a unique thematic idea, and they have a variety of assets in them, not just a single asset kind of product. We're pretty good at that. We've done it 7 times. Our companies have attracted $270 million worth of risk capital, so it's coming along fairly well. We've got a product in human trials now. We'll have this time next year a couple of more either in or almost in human trials. The second thing we do is help existing companies scale up, because we do have a strong base of biotechnology companies across the country. Really, it's centered in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. So we help those companies scale up so that they have a better chance at being one of those long-term sustainable companies. And again, our track record there is pretty good. We've done that 30 times. The third thing we do is train, because that's an important part of building an ecosystem. So we have a couple of institutes under what we call the Cdrd Academy. The first is with undergraduates and graduate students. It is focused on helping scientists be more commercially minded. Because we have an organization of 100 people, 75 of whom are scientists, commercially trained scientists. That's really important. We know that program works because we've graduated just over 200 people through that program, and 96% of them go on to relevant jobs in industry.
And staying here in Canada?
5% of them in Canada.
Okay,
so the vast
I think it's
majority of them in Canada.
important that we retain that talent.
Critically important. The other institute we've just launched is called the Executive Institute, because again, one of the things that happens when you lose those anchor companies is building that executive knowledge, management knowledge of how to take these companies forward. We're really excited about it. We're doing it in partnership with a group in North Carolina called the Center for Creative Leadership, which is literally the #1 group in the world in leadership training. And what's even more exciting about it is that half of the participants are men and half of the participants are women. And in fact, we made a commitment when we launched it that it would be gender balanced. And the really exciting part is it could have been seriously unbalanced if we'd allowed more people to participate, with more women than men, because we had a significant interest. It was also balanced across the country. There's also a fair bit of diversity to it, which I think is important, because frankly, like most industries, the biotechnology industry does a remarkably poor job of encouraging diversity.
What role do you play in helping to attract capital? You referred to it as risk capital before, and I think that's the way an awful lot of people look at that. It's a long-term investment. There are risks because you don't know whether or not you're ever going to clear all those hurdles, such as the FDA, get to human trials. How can you help to attract the kind of capital that's required to grow this research into a commercialized product?
So first of all, you're absolutely right. This is a high-risk industry. And so one of my favorite mantras is that there is so much of it that you can't control. You'd better do a good job of controlling the things you can. And some of the things you can do early in that process, before you ask for risk capital, is dig deeply into a product. Run multiple early studies. Run studies that are large enough to give you a data set. The reason we do that is, it was a great study published in the journal Nature, which is probably one of the preeminent scientific journals in the world, about 4 or 5 years ago. It looked at 400 products that had been approved from about 200 companies, and it ranked the determinants of success for getting a drug approved. The #1 determinant for getting a drug approved is to kill a program early.
To kill a program early?
Because of what it says about you as an organization. Right? It says you're trying lots of things, but when you start a program, you're going deep early. You're trying to kill it early. You're trying to find out what the problems are early, so that when you get to your original question, when you get to the point of asking for risk capital, you know you've squeezed out as much of the risk as you can. And that's basically our job, to say, let's take these innovations we have across Canada, let's put them together in larger thematic opportunities, but let's also make sure that when we're doing that, we've asked the tough questions early, and we've asked them in a way that generates a robust enough data set. And then the classic thing in this space, you follow the data.
And then that process can take a long time. I thought that when you said the #1 determinant was, do you have enough money? Because we are talking about risk capital, and you have to continue to attract new financing at every stage. Is most of that money coming from within a Canadian pool, or do you have to reach out internationally?
No, most of the $270 million that has come into our companies, I don't know the exact number, but probably 60-65% of it has been international money, predominantly U.S. money.
Probably from companies that have an appetite for this and experience.
Coming from typically from venture capital firms that have the depth and experience. That's, again, one of the challenges as you try and build that venture capital knowledge in Canada. It's not yet a large enough market to really have a lot of specialist firms in biotech. I think there are 10 or 12.
How important then is it that federal and provincial governments get behind creating these centers for excellence that we're now starting to see in high tech? Do we need to have that same cluster, super cluster funding and community around biotech?
Well, I mean, absolutely yes, and I think the governments across the country actually deserve a fair bit of credit for having done that. I mean, an organization like ours, so again, you start back at the basic research, a monstrous investment there. An organization like ours that is meant to help be that bridge to commercial activity. And I think even within some of the superclusters, like particularly in Vancouver, the digital supercluster, there is an important component of that is health and precision health, exploiting data available to really define a product for an individual. I think is an exciting part of it. We're happy to be part of that.
So that ties in with Genome BC and the work that they're doing in funding.
Absolutely,
yeah.
we do a lot of work together. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I think it's important to say, in fairness around the supercluster program, the criteria behind the supercluster program is that each cluster had to be led by an anchor company.
Right.
And we don't have anchor companies.
So we have to create that anchor company.
We have to create. Look, we've got some great companies. I mean, in Vancouver, Stem Cell is a spectacular company.
And an extraordinary success story.
Extraordinary success story, and both personal success stories for Doctors Alan and Connie Eves are spectacular people. But that organization that they built is an organization of spectacular people. I think we should all be very proud of them. And they're probably as close as we are in the country to an anchor today. So there are lots of good companies. I don't want to suggest that there are lots of. I genuinely believe we're well down the path to recreating a whole series of anchors across the country. But we have to be focused on that.
And Dr. Eves does want to play that role.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So. The initiative that they've done, again, in credit to mostly to them, but also to the federal and provincial governments for participating financially in the new facility that they want to build, will absolutely be a catalyst for that kind of regenerative medicine, of which we have a lot in this community and we have a lot in Canada. It will be an essential part of that. So we were very enthusiastic about supporting that initiative because it's terrific.
So you point out that we're 0.5% of the world's population. We're producing 5% of the research. Is the upside potential for us in contribution to GDP much greater in biotech than it would be in high tech? Because high tech is really a global environment. We're competing with everybody. But if we already have this brain power at work, do we not have a fantastic opportunity if we're able to create these superclusters and those anchor companies?
It is an extraordinary opportunity, and the answer to your question is absolutely yes. I mean, when you look, the difference, I don't really like to compare industries because it's not necessarily a competition between industries, but I think the biggest difference is in our industry, once you have that economic success, it's sustained because of the intellectual property that underlies all of the work that we do. So there is an extraordinary opportunity here for Canada. And I think in addition to producing well above our pro rata rate of the research, it's highly respected research. I think that's important too, right? It's the impact factor of that research is dramatically higher than most countries in the world.
You've had some success. You're moving along. It looks like the governments of Canada and provinces and so on are paying attention. How important is your relationship with UBC? Because that's where you're based. Why UBC, and how important is that relationship?
So the organization emerged out of UBC, SFU, and the BC Cancer Agency. They were our original founding groups who recognized the need for this kind of translational role to take place. Obviously, they've all had a fair bit of success along the way in different iterations of producing products. So they were the original founders of the organization. And then I think in a remarkable display of national commitment, they said, you know what, if the federal government wants to come along and make this a national organization and expand the work across the country, that's a good thing. because the scale is important, and we can't try and recreate what we do here in Toronto and then recreate it again in Montreal. It would be dopey, right? The market's just not big enough for it. And I think they deserve an awful lot of credit for saying if the federal government's prepared to do that. And again, to their credit, the federal government has made that commitment. And so we see now about a third of our activities in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia, about a third of our activities in the Greater Toronto Area, and about a third in Montreal, which genuinely reflects the industry as it exists today.
So you had some success. What are the next hurdles that you have to overcome that move us closer to getting to that place where I think we'd all like to see biotech research in Canada?
I think we need to just stay focused on those three functions: creating companies of scale, helping existing ones scale up, and training that next generation, particularly around that executive institute that I talked about a minute ago. There's no magic pill here, just to push the biotech analogy. There's no magic solution. It's a case of classic singles and doubles, and really to help build the ecosystem. But again, when you look at even the success that we've had to date, we know that the process works, and we know even our most successful company, we ultimately merged into a really exciting Vancouver company called Zymeworks, and it's just a great example of all of those efforts working well together, the research efforts being complementary, the people being complementary, and the people being committed to building an organization in Canada for Canada.
So you have 7 what we would consider to be success stories right at the moment. How many others are in the development stage?
I think, so we've got 7 at this point, and let's be clear. I mean, the 80-20 rule is probably going to apply. It's a high-risk business. Let's not kid ourselves. We try and do 1 or 2 when we get to a full state. We try and do 1 or 2 a year. We have a couple that are moving quite nicely in a stealth mode right now. You know, stealth mode means I'm not going to brag about them and pound the table until we're ready to bring them out. But we're pretty excited about the work that's happening, and I think you'll see a lot of pretty interesting things coming out of it.
Well, it's a pretty exciting time, and it will provide tremendous opportunities for a lot of people, especially as we're looking at sort of the shift in the workforce as we move forward. We need jobs like this in Canada because they are intelligence-based and they sell into an international marketplace.
And you know, one of the things that's interesting, it's another unique Canadian advantage that we don't often give ourselves credit for. The multicultural nature of our community and our country is a huge resource in an industry like this one that is global. When you look at those 200 trainees that I talked about, at last count, I think it's 29 or 30 countries from around the world. And we actually have a fun video on our website of I think it's 8 or 9 different languages today, based on the team we have. That's a huge advantage for Canada. It's a huge advantage for us, frankly, but it's a huge advantage for Canada, particularly in a world where nationalism and nativism is rearing its ugly head. It's a terrific opportunity for us and a strength that we have.
Well, I'm happy to hear that this is happening, and I wish you great success because you win, we all win.
Absolutely. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.